What we will provide here is an overview of key historical points. What we will see is that racism is grounded in U.S. history, our laws, and our institutions. It takes place in our interpersonal relationships. The point of this program is to promote understanding of the issues of racism in the U.S. and the task of dismantling the current paradigm of human interaction. A new command I give you: love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. How did we get to where we are now? Frederick Douglass said, "I assert most unhesitatingly that the religion of the South is a mere covering for the most horrid crimes, a justifier of the most appalling barbarity, a shelter under which the darkest, foulest, grossest, and most infernal deeds of slaveholders find the strongest protection."
Religion in the South was used as a cover-up, just so as to justify the oppression, the slavery, and the unjust treatment of slaves.
What we see here is that slavery has existed in various forms over time, for centuries, across cultures, across countries. In the U.S., many consider 1619 to be the beginning of slavery in the U.S. In August of that year, 20 African slaves were brought ashore in Jamestown, Virginia.
Slavery did not begin here in America. It goes back to the days of Egypt and the Israelites.
There were boats carrying the cargo. From the 16th to 19th century, over 10 million Africans were transported across the Atlantic Ocean to the U.S. 13% of those Africans died. The cause of death: malnutrition, disease, and suicides.
It was the height of barbaric treatment, bringing people across the continent in the waters that's with limited food and toiletries and all that encompass oppression. But I have a sense of why they wanted them from Africa, because these were strong people who they think could maybe weather the storm of abuse. So it was really the height of barbaric treatment.
They had no problem stealing the people. They stole the land, they stole the people, and they were intending, there was at least 400 years of chattel slavery in the United States, of turning people into a thing.
Racial prejudice, the superiority of white-skinned Europeans over the dark-skinned Africans, was one justification for slavery.
It's intentional, and in the United States, it's intentional governmental discrimination, and it's aimed at Black people.
Racism in the U.S. is a system developed over time for white people to enforce their power and privilege over non-whites through political, economic, and institutional means. It's a system, a set of principles or procedures according to which something is done, an organized scheme or method.
The systems that we currently have do not provide opportunities for those that are not in power, are not in a position to learn the political climate and the understanding and the language.
Frederick Douglass said, "We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and the future."
It's very important that our young children learn their history so that it helps empower them and realize they are truly capable of holding political office and making changes within the system.
Likewise, this very brief overview of the history of racism in the U.S. is so that we can be responsible for the past and create something different for the future. So let's take a look. In 1700, historical treasures like Mount Vernon, the White House, Monticello were built by slaves. This is emblematic of a nation built on the foundation of slavery and racism. Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers and the third president of the U.S., said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yet Jefferson claimed ownership of over 600 slaves, and he's known for his relationship with Sally Hemings, one of his slaves. Evidence indicates the relationship began when Sally was 14 and Jefferson was 44. Jefferson fathered 6 children with Sally. The 1800s saw the outlawing of the African slave trade, but it didn't end slavery in the U.S. Although the U.S. Congress outlawed the African slave trade in 1808, that did not end slavery. In fact, over the next 50 years, the slave population nearly tripled. By 1860, it had reached nearly 4 million, with more than half living in the cotton-producing states of the South. And in fact, in the South, Jefferson Davis, one of the Confederate leaders, said, "African slavery, as it exists in the United States, is a moral, social, and political blessing."
It's sad to know that there will be a lot of Europeans, people of color, individuals that can classify themselves as white on the census that will listen to those words and believe them.
What was he smoking?
Slavery, as it existed in the U.S., was the economic engine for the South. Out of that came the abolitionist movement. Harriet Tubman, one of the most preeminent abolitionists, said, "I have heard their groans and sighs and seen their tears, and I would give every drop of blood in my veins to free them." As a result of the Union victory in the Civil War and the ratification of the 13th Amendment, nearly 4 million slaves were freed. The 14th Amendment in 1868 granted African American citizenship, and the 15th Amendment in 1870 guaranteed their right to vote.
I don't even think we were able to vote. Although we had the right to vote, it was like if they freed us, however, didn't inform us or enlighten us to the opportunity that we had. So we were still enslaved.
We continued to see this, that when morality comes up against profit, it is seldom profit that loses. When the Kerner Commission told white America what Black Americans had always known, that prejudice and hatred built in the nation's slums maintains them and profits by them. And white America could not believe it. But it is true. Unless we start to fight and defeat the enemies in our own country, poverty and racism, and make our talk of equality and opportunity ring true, we are exposed in the eyes of the world as hypocrites when we talk about making people free. In the 1950s and 60s, we saw additional legislation to outlaw racism. Legislation would not end racism. As Martin Luther King said, 300 years of humiliation, abuse, and deprivation cannot be expected to find voice in a whisper.
In the wake of George Floyd's death, a lot of people woke up. A lot of people woke up to the racism that's inherent in some of our systems. And so in a time of pandemic, even as people desire to kind of return to normal, many folks are realizing that that normalcy that was existing before the pandemic was pretty terrible for a lot of people. And so they're getting engaged politically, trying to do what they can to change those systems.
The Supreme Court outlawed segregation in schools. The Civil Rights Act made it a crime to obstruct voter registration. The Civil Rights Bill passed in 1964 banned segregation in the workplace and in public accommodations. And the Civil Rights Bill in 1968 banned discrimination in housing. Malcolm X said, "If you stick a knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches, that's not progress. If you pull it out all the way, that's not progress. The progress comes from healing the wound that the blow made. They haven't begun to pull the knife out. They won't even admit that the knife is there." In the new century, in the 2000s, when in 2019 we acknowledged the 400th anniversary of slaves having been brought to the U.S., studies show conditions have worsened. In 2017, Black unemployment was higher than in 1968, as was the rate of incarcerated individuals who are Black. The wealth gap has also increased substantially, with the median white family having 10 times more wealth than the median black family. We are resegregating our cities and our schools, condemning millions of kids to inferior education and taking away their real possibility of getting out of poverty. Barack Obama said, "For all the cruelty and hardship of our world, we are not mere prisoners of fate. Our actions matter and can bend history in the direction of justice."
Now we've woken up and we've hit the snooze again. The next generation is asking, am I next? This is a humanity issue. We must come together to speak, listen, educate, legislate, and communicate. This is a call to action. We must stop racism now.